Weekdays with Bernie segment tonight, some of the most dubious things said after the Paris terror attack. We begin in Stockholm, Sweden, where Madonna said this.
There are people who have no respect for human life. And there are people that do atrocious, degrading, and unforgivable things to other human beings. But we will never, ever, ever change this world that we live in if we do not change ourselves. If we do not change the way we treat one another on a daily basis.
Joining us now from Miami, the purveyor of BernardGoldberg.com, Mr. Goldberg. So, Bernie, if only you would be a nicer guy, ISIS would retreat. Come on.
Stop being sarcastic. I think Madonna makes a very good point. If we behave well towards each other, good things can happen. Here's my advice to Madonna. Tell it to the terrorists. I mean, she is a savvy businesswoman. I will grant her that. She's a smart businesswoman. But this idea that all we have to do is tell people to play nice, and that will change the world, and somehow, I'm not clear how, will combat terrorism, makes Madonna sound at best naive and at worst idiotic.
But here's the problem. You deal with deranged individuals, and that's what ISIS is comprised of, deranged individuals. 7 guys blow themselves up so that they can slaughter innocent civilians, and they think they're going to heaven. And no matter how nice you are, Goldberg, or I am, and God knows we are very nice, that's not going to change deranged individuals. The only thing that changes deranged individuals is incarceration, taking them off, taking them out so they can't harm others. So that's the message, and you can do it a variety of ways. Yes, everybody should be nice to each other, goodwill toward men. But when you hear a pop icon like that spout this gibberish, I'm just going, my God. All right, we have another piece of tape, and this one is a journalist on CNN. Go.
Coming up, it's an all too familiar pattern, a well-planned attack on the West followed by a swift and violent response that further stokes the fires of jihad. Will the West make these mistakes again? That's next on GPS.
So the response stokes the fires of jihad. The response.
Well, listen, Fareed Zakaria is a bright guy, so maybe he's right. Maybe the response is a mistake. Maybe violent responses are a mistake. So here's a better idea that maybe Fareed would go along with. Instead of a violent response to the terrorists, maybe the French should send the terrorists flowers and croissants and a thank you note. I would ask Fareed, who's a bright guy, and I mean that, he clearly is a bright guy, if a violent response is the wrong response, what's the proper response
Madonna
for people
just
who kill
gave it
over
to you,
100
Goldberg.
innocent people?
Madonna just gave you the proper response, and Fareed, I'm sure, would agree that we must be nicer to each other. But look, you keep saying that this guy, I don't know him, is a smart guy, an intelligent guy.
That wasn't smart.
I got to question it.
That wasn't smart.
Was one of the, and that's why he's in the dumbest thing said segment, Goldberg. That was just dumb. Just dumb. You have to respond. If you don't respond, you get killed. Just as those poor people in Paris got killed and 3,000 people on 9/11 got killed. You have to respond.
But what these two examples and the 2 more that we're going to do in a bit, they fit into a pattern. These aren't conservatives who are thinking this way. These aren't army, military generals who are thinking this way. This is a liberal mindset. It's a liberal mindset that suggests that violence isn't necessarily the answer. Playing nice is a response to terrorism. The only problem is terrorists didn't get the memo on any of this. That's the problem.
All right, and I have to tell everybody that there's a rumor going around Washington, D.C. that President Obama is going to appoint Yoko Ono as Secretary of Defense. That is not true. Now, we're going to hold Bernie over because we have 2 more whoppers, as he mentioned, for you. Continuing now with Weekdays with Bernie, Mr. Goldberg rejoining us from South Florida. Speaking on CNN about Syrian refugees, a man named Shadi Hamid said this.
There's perhaps one refugee that was part of this out of hundreds of thousands. That's kind of a collective punishment if you say, well, then we're going to try to stop all refugees from coming in because of one person.
That one person was one of the terrorists who killed 130 in Paris. So Mr. Hamid apparently knows that all the hundreds of thousands of other Syrian refugees are peaceful, not involved with terrorism. That's amazing. Is it not, Mr. Goldberg?
Yeah, this is a common theme, Bill, on the left, that we should let these people in, these refugees in, because they need our help, which they do. And anyway, very few of them are terrorists. I'm sure progressives don't see it this way. I'm sure they don't think of themselves this way. But what it comes down to is that they're willing to sacrifice a few hundred innocent lives just so that they can show off their progressive credentials, so that they can say, you see how good we are? We want to help these poor people, these poor refugees. Well, you know what? A lot of us want to help these poor refugees, but there is a legitimate concern about even if 99%, even if 99.5% are good people, we have a right to worry about the other half of 1% because they could do tremendous damage.
And have done. I mean, the guy involved in the Paris attack got into France as a Syrian refugee. It took him a couple of weeks to wipe out these people. But I have to dispute this. I don't think that the progressive community really cares about anything but the progressive community. And I'll put forth that I, at the beginning of the program, said if NATO declared war on ISIS and NATO goes into Syria, they could establish safe zones for Syrian refugees. And they could all come back from Europe, all come back from Turkey, wherever else they are, because the NATO forces would protect them. I don't think progressives would support the NATO troops in Syria, Bernie. I don't think they would. So they really don't want to solve the problem, do they?
They want to let people in because they honestly think that they need help, and they would get help the way you described it too. But it enables them to say, to feel good about themselves. I mean, it's the same thing in race relations where they show good racial manners, where they always want to show that they're the good ones, they're not the bigots. And I think a lot of people on the left are trying to show, you see how good we are? You see how decent we are?
Yeah,
hey,
I get
look,
it, but they don't really sincerely.
Almost none of them are terrorists. What are you worried about?
Oh, yeah, but if they really wanted to solve the problem, they would go with the best solution, and they don't. They just want to be lost in this progressive land. Now, you know this guy, Mos Def? Is that how you say his name, Mos Def? He's a rapper.
Yeah,
you know him?
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, I don't listen. I listen to Sinatra, not Mos Def, but I know who he is. Yes.
Okay. I heard the name, but again, I don't have much frame of reference. But anyway, he wanted desperately to weigh in on the Paris terror attack. Roll the tape.
With Holland is talking about doing closing the borders, how are you going to put innocent people under suspicion for crimes that they did not commit? Closing these borders does not bring back any of them dead people. Not one of them.
Right.
And if it's all about prevention, that's nonsense. I don't think Francois Hollande cared any more about the Parisian people than ISIS.
Unbelievable. So he's ranting about Hollande closing the French border right after the attack so other jihadists couldn't get in. And then he says that the president of France doesn't care about his people and he's on a par with ISIS. Now, you would think that everybody would say, you know, Mos, you need a vacation, all right? You're totally out of your mind. But no, nobody's going to say that except you and me, Bernie.
This is where I draw the line, Bill. I'll do a lot of things for you, but this is too stupid for a reaction. This is just too... Look, but this fits a liberal theme, and that theme is that anyone who's against allowing refugees in is some kind of bigot, and they don't give any credence to the other side. But there was one liberal, you ready for this? Chris Matthews, of all people, came up with what I think is an interesting idea. Last night on his program, he said, when these 10,000 Syrians come in, the United States government should separate out the young men and say, go back to Syria and fight for your country, because there are people here in America who say Americans should go to Syria to fight for your country. That doesn't make sense. We're not going to go to Syria to fight for your country while you're leaving your country so you don't have to fight for your country. For Chris Matthews, that was a pretty good point.
right.
I give him credit for that.
Bernie Goldberg, everybody.